All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Minority Mavericks. This is Angel Leon, your host, and remember that this is the show where we tell the story of all minority entrepreneurs, founders, and investors of this world. And in today's show and episode, I have the pleasure to have Tyronne Stoudemire, and it's an honor to have him on the show. He's a DEI expert and guru out there. And he's doing a lot of great work for diversity and inclusion. Welcome to the show, Tyrone.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on doing work like this. I think it's these type of venues and media outlets we need to use to educate, to inform, inspire, and encourage others. So thank you for all your work in this space.
Definitely. No worries. And thank you, for taking the time to speak with our audience today and tell your story. Our audience wants to listen from people just like you, right? That have struggled, but then have faced those challenges and have come them. So just to get started, let's just do a quick introduction and background, right? So, could you start by just telling us a bit about your journey, where you come from, your background, all that, and what has led you to be the person that you are today and the Vice President of Global Diversity and Inclusion you are today?
Thank you. So first and foremost, really brief here. I was born and raised in a little town called Detroit, Michigan, 2737 Ferry Park in Linwood, just blocks from Motown, Hillview, USA. Both my parents migrated from the north to the south. They met, they married, they had 4 children. My mother continued her education, became a registered nurse. My father worked at Cadillac Motors, took early retirement, and started his own trucking business. We then moved from the inner city, where everybody looked like me, walked like me, talked like me. We had to play the same type of games, and we ate the same kinds of foods, to move to an area that no one looked like us. We were the first Black family in the 70s to move in a very dominant white community. And we weren't necessarily accepted in that community. We weren't welcomed. We didn't feel included. Our home was vandalized. They were driving their cars across our lawn, throwing eggs at our window. They said very vocal things to us. So my first years of understanding difference was not necessarily a good one, right? I was fearful. I was just, 8 years old,
Right.
very young, very impressionable. But there was a glimmer of hope. There were a couple by the name of Wally and Laura. They were empty nesters. They lived on the corner from us. Their kids were grown. They were retired. And Laura was your typical Leave It to Beaver mom. She had the poodle skirt, the apron, the coiffed hair, the pearls, the heels. She was always baking something. And Wally was kind of your traditional, in his yard, cutting grass and trimming his bushes, always doing something in his garage. And as a kid at 8 years old, I was always curious to what he was doing in that garage. And
Right.
growing up watching TV shows like Friday the 13th and mystery movies and suburbs, I thought he must be hiding a dead body in that garage. Right? It was really kind of strange. And so Wally and Laura came over one day and to welcome us to the community and to apologize how people were treating us. And they rang the doorbell. And as you know, children, when the bell rings and then you can't go out and play, you run to the door. Somebody's here. And it was Wally and Laura introduced themselves. And Laura bought an apple pie and a bag of cookies. She was a baker. And we took the cookies and apple pie. And I came to Mom, oh my gosh, they gave us cookies and apple pie. Her response was, don't you eat those cookies. Now they're trying to poison us. So my age differences really supported me
Right.
all through my entire life. I was always the only uh,
Right.
one of, right? And I've learned over time we use the word minority, and minority is a mathematical equation. It means less than. So in our mindset, I felt I was less than others because I was under this label of minority. We're
Yeah.
not less than anyone, right? And I think we're much similar and we are different, but our difference lies in our cultural backgrounds. Messages that my mom taught you may be different than messages my mom taught me. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but how we're going to view the world and solve conflicts and reduce conflicts is going to be based upon our worldview. So that has followed me and led me down the path is that I needed to actually find my purpose. And my purpose was people. When I say people, I mean all people. So I have dedicated and committed my life to making sure we close this gap. We've done a pretty good job of equality in this nation, but we suffer with equity. Meeting people where they are, giving the tools where they are. We all start from a different place, a different time. Some was, forced to be here through slavery. Some came through here by migration, global migration. Some came for just, for a better life. It doesn't mean we're less than, but where we start and how we get get in front of these things are require effort from us all.
Definitely.
So I have dedicated my time. I recently wrote a book called Diversity Done the Right Way. There's a good way, there's a bad way, there's a different way, there's a how to. But I think if we really lean into our cultural backgrounds and look at diversity not as a problem to be solved, but a difference to leverage. How do we leverage all of our differences for the greater good of mankind? How do we be good human beings for society to really care for one another, lift as we climb, and create opportunity for all of us, regardless of our race, our gender, our orientation, our background, whatever you want to put in there? How do we make it easy and accessible for everyone? So I said a lot there. I hope I really get the pictures that I think I was created, and my purpose is to care for people and to care for people to be their best.
Definitely well said. And yeah, you have taken all this passion, right, that you have, of course, for this topic to other levels, right? Not just like on your personal level, you trying to understand these things, but you've done a lot of work out there for many organizations. Currently, you're with Hyatt. Is that correct?
Yes, I am currently the Senior Vice President of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with Hyatt. I joined Hyatt because it's a purpose-driven organization, and diversity, equity, and inclusion is the manifestation of our purpose and how it comes alive. So the organization gives me the opportunity to really work out and live out my purpose.
Yeah, definitely. And can you share, given that Hyatt, of course, it's a global thing, right? So could you share how do you approach creating and implementing, right, these strategies across such a global enterprise?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And again, this really is really the reflection of the organization's purpose, right? When we say we care for people to be their best, we mean all people from all backgrounds, all demographics, locations, regions, etc. So you have to start with that. That is our bedrock, is what we build on. It's our North Star, if you will. So we talk about care and care for people. We talk about all people. So diversity, equity, inclusion becomes the manifestation of our purpose. Is how it comes alive. So we
Okay.
look at data to determine on where the opportunities are. We look at spending and buying power. We look at our guests. We look at feedback. We thrive off of feedback because we think it's a gift. So we create an environment for people to be safe and to be healthy and to feel cared for. We have to listen. It starts with listening to people from all backgrounds and all races, creed, and color, right? Regional differences as well. So the work is really we think globally, but we behave regionally. Each region has its own unique opportunities as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. For example, universal around the world are women, right? We have women around the world, and how we cultivate and advance and develop and support women may be different in China than it is in the United States.
Okay.
When we look at diversity around pride, in some countries, it's illegal to be gay. You can go to jail. You can be harmed in some of the countries outside the United States where it's not. In this country, people still have homophobic, and we have women, Asian hate, right?
Hmm.
Those types of things, those require systemic issues that require systemic solutions. So working through a council, establishing diversity business research groups, and our research groups are designed by the minority for the majority to have an experience otherwise they would have. We know what it's like to be Latino, Asian, Black, 365 days out of the year. But sometimes our white counterparts who may have never had an interaction with someone that's different. Study shows that more than 70% of Fortune 500 company CEOs have no Black and brown friends. So
Definitely.
where else would they grow?
Hmm.
I think there's good and bad people in the world. I think there's more good than bad. I think that people lack awareness. I think people lack the experience of other cultures. And if we can provide them with that, I believe that they'll make the adjustment and influence others, influence systems that will harm people or keep people out of safe passage.
Definitely, and I agree with that. This is one thing that I kind of say in all of my episodes, sort of, but you just touched it upon again. In terms of educating and exposing people to other cultures, right? I was in the Navy. I travel,
Mm-hmm.
a lot, and I travel to different countries where are very, very different. Where I see the point of just like we shouldn't be even complaining about anything in this country because some other countries have it even worse, right? But I was exposed since I'm like 20 something, like very young in life. I was exposed to a lot of poverty in these countries, to a lot of different cultures, a lot of different thinking, ways of doing things, ways of seeing things. And I believe that actually helped me, grow. I mean, I come from a Latino country myself, so I'm part of the whole spectrum, right? But at the same time, uh, I came to the U.S. As a very young Latino, and then that cultural shock just was, right away, right.
Right
And it
away.
wasn't until I actually joined the Navy that helped me. I mean, just my own teammates, my own shipmates, right. They were from the Philippines, or they were Black, or they were Asian.
Hmm.
So inside the same organization, I had the opportunity to be around a lot of diversity, and that helped me a lot. So I definitely, agree with that part, that, I believe there's not just education as in, teaching people that, hey, we're all the same, we're all people, right? I believe that everyone kind of knows that we're all people in some sort of way, right? But it's that teaching them, that trying to change the mentality from, this is the way I do things and this is the way they do things, right?
Hmm.
And there's no right or wrong in here. It's just how we do things in our own respective cultures, etc. So very
A couple,
interesting to
a
see
couple
that.
things to respond to that. First and foremost, thank you for your service, and thank you for sharing your experiences. I believe that we define culture as the behavior interpretation of how a community lives out its values to thrive and strive. We also know that the key work in getting to understand the cultures is called cross-cultural competence. And cross-cultural competence is defined as the ability to discern and take into account one own and other world views with empathy and care, to be able to seize opportunities and resolve conflicts in ways that maximize cultural differences. Cross-cultural competence is one of the top 10 competencies required to do business in a global economy. Well, how do you measure cross-cultural competence, Tyrone? We measure cross-cultural competence through a survey called the Intercultural Development Inventory, created by Dr. Mitch Hammer. And this
Okay.
inventory helps us understand how sensitive we are to other cultures. It's a developmental, so we grow over time, as you articulated your travels and how you're able to see the world. It helped to shape your worldview and how you were able to see things differently and experience things differently. It made you more comfortable. It made it more psychological safe for you to engage other cultures, and makes you who the human being you are today. So the more we can expose people to different cultures and backgrounds, and we assess them with this tool called the Individual Development Inventory, which is developmental, starting with denial. We all start in life with a place of denial because we don't know what we don't know. And we have a tendency when we don't know things to suppress, ignore, and sometimes to withdraw. The next orientation on the continuum is actually polarization, them against us, kind of a one up and a one down. People will say things like, my culture is better than your culture. I am the dominant culture,
Mhm.
but it puts us against each other. We sometimes see that in our federal government with our Republicans versus Democrats. We say we want the same thing, but we look at it very differently, articulate it very differently. Then
Mhm.
it's minimization. And minimization is orientation. We're all the same, right? I don't see differences. I don't see color. My best friend is Black. If I gotta love women, I married one. We've been taught not to look at the difference, right? Because
Right.
we're all the same. But we're all very different based upon our cultural backgrounds, where we grew up, what region of the world we lived in. Our parents are different, but we've been taught as a nation to ignore that. I am suggesting if we don't look at the difference, it will not make a difference. And
Definitely.
then acceptance. I accept, I leverage, and I value the differences. These individuals that move beyond Taco Tuesday, beyond Friday, and Soul Food Sunday, they go beyond ethnic food and beyond ethnic garb and immerse themselves into those other cultures. One
Mhm.
by perhaps traveling to those cultures, uh, uh, at being educated in those different cultures, by attending universities or studies abroad. And then there's adaptation. These individuals who routinely shift their behaviors to adapt to those cultures by learning the language, by wearing the garb, and it's not Halloween, but fully
Mhm.
merging in those become bridges for others to come across. I believe the more we understand language, the more we understand cultural backgrounds, we have a better way of resolving this issue between them versus us on a one up, one down. Getting rid of Asian hate, the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matters, all those different organizations are thriving and striving to be accepted and feel like they belong. But I think the default for all this work is race, and it's
Mhm.
embedded in fear. So the survey gives us language, it gives us behaviors, and something we can work together to be able to solve for one that benefits all of us. So a little long explanation, but I do think there's a right way to doing it, and I articulate that in my book, Diversity Done Right.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think about it in food myself. So I'm a big fan of cooking. I cook a lot, and I like to explore different things. And to me, it's very, very interesting, food and cuisine from different countries, and not just like whether it's good or not, but why is it that they eat that, right? Like in Puerto Rico, for example, where I come from, we have a very specific type of food, but that food is very specific because of a very specific reason.
Sure.
And technically speaking, the food that we consider typical, right? It's actually food that it's from poor people
Yeah.
that didn't have anything to eat a long time ago, and they're eating these things that they were able to produce themselves, they were able to grow themselves, et cetera, and then that became that typical, right, type of cuisine for us. But at the end of the day, it comes from a minority group. It comes from a group and community in needs, and it doesn't come from this flourish, right, type of ecosystem and culture overall. And to me, that's very interesting. That tells a lot about where we come from, who we are, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very interesting that you approach those things like that as well, because I do believe that just not seeing the difference is not going to make a difference, like you said.
It's not going to make a difference. I think that it makes us human beings, and we have to think about each generation pays it forward for the next generation. What are we doing for our children and our grandchildren to be successful in a world that will be extremely diverse, right?
Hmm.
By 2025, baby boomers, 80 million baby boomers would have transitioned out of the workforce or close to it. The next generation of workers are 40 million, right? There's a downfall of 40 million qualified workers. Corporations will struggle to be able to find talent and to retain talent, particularly of color,
Hmm.
right? By 2025, a heterosexual white male will be a minority. How are we going to prepare people to be in spaces that they've never been in before, to be
Right.
comfortable and also to thrive in an environment where they may be viewed as less than, right? So I think it's important that we, pause, give ourselves, in a world we can be anything we want to be kind to ourselves and be kind to others.
Definitely, definitely, and I'm sure that you have an extensive and very impressive career, right? And you have a lot of just knowledge, right, in all this, and of course you coming from the minority groups as well, right? You have built, right, through your life this whole again knowledge, right? But I'm sure that you also struggle, right, coming up this way. So it will be interesting if you can share with with the audience like some of those challenges, or just one, right, of those challenges that you faced and how you overcame them.
So again, I deal with it daily, right? We know as people of color what it's like to be treated differently. We know what it's like to be labeled and stereotyped, right? So I've had situations where individuals who many thought that I was not black, that I was from India, right? And so you figured, well, I'm actually black. Tyrone is the blackest name in the black community, right? But oftentimes people were confusing, so I get it on multiple levels. The other stigma is, being is that I tend to talk as I have a high school diploma, not a college degree, right? And so people look at he's not educated, he's not smart. That also happens with people who speak English is not their first language. To make assumptions and judgments about people because they don't speak English. Quite frankly, individual person that can speak multiple languages, are pretty smart to me, right? You studied, you learned, those different things. So I live under those labels and stereotypes. I had to overcome them. One, I had to rely upon what my parents told me is that I am somebody. I do have something to give, right? And I had to
Mhm.
be myself, understanding myself first, and then understanding others, and then how we work collectively across those differences. So again, listening is key. My parents taught me that the two uh, important words in society is please and thank you. From a diversity
Mhm.
perspective, I've added tell me more. There's things we don't know about other cultures. I've had to say, let me explain to you how this makes me feel. Dr. Maya Angelou said we can apologize for what we say and ask forgiveness for what we do, but how we make people feel. So my parents taught me never, ever let people take people's dignity away from them. So how do we continue to respect people and respect them and have them to respect us? So I've had a lot of situations where my heart was broken. I felt that I was less than. I felt that I wasn't contributing. I never gave up. I took projects at work that nobody else wanted to take because I learned earlier there's only one way up when things are broken. It's up, right?
Right.
I came early. I stayed late. I often knew that I was working twice as hard as my white counterparts, but I didn't give up. And I surrounded myself with individuals who were like-minded. I surrounded myself with people who were successful that I wanted to be like. And best, and far and foremost, I'm a Christian, so I relied upon my faith. I relied upon my pastor and the preaching and the teaching and my community to uplift, inspire, and encourage me to be able to move forward. And that would also create an accountability, that I was accountable not only for myself, but accountable for others. There's a responsibility for us who are the only one of. And that sometimes is a two-edged sword that cuts both ways, right? I wasn't black enough to be black. I wasn't white enough to be white. So I was somewhere in the middle and labeled as an Indian, right? So again, I had to show up different. I had to show up with confidence. I had to have courageous conversations and stand firm on my faith. So for those of you who may be Christians, for those of you, whatever your religion may be, you got to pray to that. You got to pray. You got to fast. You got to stay with it. You just giving up is not an option for me.
Definitely. And I wanted to highlight something that you say. We all have something to give, right? All of us, right? We're all unique in our own ways as human beings individually, whether you're wherever you are, wherever you come from. And I feel that's the most beautiful part of us being humans, right? That
Yes.
we're very unique, and each of those uniqueness has something to supply to something else that's bigger, right? And that's how I believe that we can also grow, right? Like that, if we understand that the most beautiful part of us being humans is that we're unique, and trying to learn that, it just doesn't necessarily just brings this person into the whole, right? But it also makes me grow as an individual, because now I'm more aware, right? And I
Yep.
believe that awareness is not necessarily there yet where it should be these days, but that's what we're working on, right? And
So I
then
believe that adults learn from having that aha moment. They get feedback, they can self-correct, and influence others, influence systems that are flawed. Again, we have to take accountability for our own behaviors and our own actions, but we also have to be able to share feedback with others. And I believe that feedback is a gift. Now, feedback can be helpful and it can be harmful. I'm a half glass full guy, so I'm always looking at how do we move ahead, right? Let's celebrate our successes. Let's not be woe is me all the time, and that's a tough thing to do. I'm on the other side, right, going down the mountain, right, but I don't forget how difficult it was for me to climb the mountain. And my next few years is how I will help others. The key definition and the meaning of power is how we empower others,
Mhm.
right? So I
Definitely.
was taught that in an early age. I was taught that through Sunday school, Bible class, and in my community, right? I'm only successful as you are.
And how, just out of curiosity, like, who do you think is responsible for that in terms of, is it us as the minority side, or, you know what I mean? Like, who do you
Yes.
think is responsible for that?
I think we're all responsible. We all play a role in this, right? I think we need to create mutual adaptation, that we're learning and growing together, that we're sharing. I need to know more about the white culture as a white culture, about the people of color. I need to know more about women. So my mom was a single mom. My grandmother was a single mom. I married, and I have a daughter. So women have shaped my worldview. I'm probably more sensitive to women than I am to some other demographic, because I grew up under that, right? I live it, right? So I'm more sensitive there. So we have to be curious. We have to be courageous, right? And we have to take charge, not only for ourselves, but for others. But we got to do it together. We got to be vulnerable. We've got to be accepting of that. It may not be, just because your experience is different doesn't mean your experience is wrong.
Right.
And, when people say, oh, that could never happen, some of our white counterparts or some of our, females may say, well, I don't have that view, so it must not be true. We have to listen and say, my experience is my experience. It is my story. It is how it made me feel. Now, I can, take the low road and woe is me, and, nobody loves me, nobody this, right? That's not proven to be successful for
Definitely. And, given your, and coming back to, your work at Hyatt, and that related, that enterprise side of things, right? You've launched a lot of diversity initiatives in your career, such as resource groups and mentoring programs, et cetera, right? Can you share a success story of or a significant impact, right, that these initiatives have had, not just in Hyatt, but in general in the global enterprise level?
Yeah, so I will share this story again, and these I have several stories in the book that you're asking me to answer questions about different scenarios and navigating through. But one comes to mind. I was on a flight going to Connecticut to celebrate my goddaughter who had became Miss Chicago, Miss Illinois, running for Miss America. And as we boarded the plane, I was sitting there in first class with my wife. The last passenger came on who happened to be an Indian woman, and she sits down in her seat, and the woman behind her kept pushing the seat forward because the seat was broken. The flight attendant says, "Listen, um, we're about to take off. It's not your responsibility. We'll get the seat fixed or move her to a different seat, but let's get taken off." And she kept pushing and pushing. Ultimately, she spit in the hair of the Indian woman,
Oh,
right?
wow.
And I either could have been a bystander or I could have leaned into the conversation. And I chose to lean into the conversation to help to resolve that. Now, this is a woman that was now fearful for her safety, for her health. The plane was predominantly a Caucasian woman, so it could have been a very ugly thing rooted in fear and racism,
Mhm.
right? But being to lean into that to make sure she was comfortable, that she had someone advocating for her. And I asked the plane the question, what if indeed, in fact, that was your mother, that was your sister, that was your daughter? Would you have not wanted someone to intervene? So when we see things, we got to take action. We just can't choose to
Right.
continue to ignore it. Now, I'm not saying putting yourself in harm's way. I'm not saying take a risk, but there's some things we can do with compassion towards other people to close the gap around this racial divide we have in this country. Another scenario was a
Yeah.
woman that was an Asian woman during the height of COVID, but was a nurse and worked 18 hours, and there were kids that were harassing her and beating her. I was equally as afraid as she was, and I stood next to her until they moved on. So some
Okay.
things we can do to right the wrong, but those are things that come to mind that I had to put myself in a situation to really show empathy plus action equals care, right?
Okay.
I've taken on projects that I know nothing about. I had to educate myself, and I had to, when I came from out of operations running call centers into diversity in HR. I had no background, no formal training. I had to surround myself with individuals to help me understand what did it mean. I had to do a lot of reading, a lot of research, which ultimately has created a me opportunity to write a book, right? So
Okay.
those are the things that I hope those examples to encourage others to want to do things, to not to give up and to stay in, hang in there.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, Tyrone, for that. Very, powerful stuff for sure. And, you have a very extensive story and very powerful, right, type of background and just in general, your professional life you have dedicated to sort of, mix with something personal as well, right? And it's very interesting to have to have that continuity, right? That it's something personal that we're all suffering, or this side of the group, right, is suffering from. But there are things, and there are people just like you as well that are willing, right, to take onto this task of, like, putting your face out there and saying your thoughts, right, and just in general, educate a lot of people that you have, potentially touched upon your entire career. So, thank you for that. And before we conclude, though, I'd love to for you to tell us a little bit more about your any future plans that you may have, and also if you want to give one piece of advice to either any minority, entrepreneur, or any minority professional out there, or even another institution that is not Hyatt, for example, and as to how would they, right, enhance their diversity inclusion programs, et cetera, et cetera, that would be great to conclude here.
So I'm going to start with the latter and say I think it's important that we as individuals and organizations join forces. When you look at not-for-profit organizations like the Urban League, NAACP, ASE, Hispanic NBA, Asian Pacific, National Association of Asian Pacific Islanders, all these not-for-profit organizations who are dedicated and committed to helping to build and strengthen those particular demographics, I think we should join those organizations. We should be supportive of those organizations and give back. We're now celebrating the 30-year anniversary of ASE, which is the Hispanic Alliance of Career Enhancement. I've been a part of the organization since its inception 30 years ago. I think it's either 30, 20, I think it's 30 years. Um, under three different presidents who led this work for the last 3 decades. And I think they have been able to really help to develop Latinos' confidence a network of individuals to share best practices and next practices, individuals that can lift as we climb. I think those organizations we should join and be a part of. I say we'll be celebrating their anniversary coming up in a couple of weeks. They have a summit. I would go out as HACE and look on their website and join that summit that's coming forward. We partner with an organization called Black Travel Summit with Black travelers between the ages of 24 to about 50 years old. Organizations that you can have kindred, like-minded, more kindred spirits, people that more look like you to kind of help build that confidence. Because some people of color, particularly, were taught to go to work every day, work hard, keep your head down, don't try to create conflict, right? And trust that your employer is going to do right by you. I'm not sure that many have been successful with that model.
Right.
It may have worked in the 60s and the 70s, but in the 21st century, if you don't celebrate your successes, if you don't brag on yourself or share with others, who else is going to do it?
Yeah.
Far too long, I think that many of us have been defined by that of white male leadership, right? Because they thought we should look like, and at some point, blacks during slavery was counted as a third of a person. Some
Right.
think we're human. I think some people still live under that mindset,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think, or join organizations. Two, I'm just a firm believer that during the pandemic and COVID, we lost loved ones. We were under enormous amount of stress. Many did not return to the workforce. I think we have to be kinder to ourselves and kinder to each other, right? I think kindness will cure all, love will conquer the world. Again, this may sound Pollyanny, but I just think it's these things. We got to just be careful how we treat each other, and treat ourselves.
Definitely.
And then don't give up. Each of us is given 24 hours to do what we will. We can do something good or do nothing at all. I charge everyone to, in the next 24 hours, do something for someone else. Hold the elevator door for someone. Pay for the person behind you Starbucks. Help a woman who's struggling with kids getting through the revolving door and a stroller. Common things that our parents probably taught us when we were younger, apply those things today and just show empathy and care towards one another, because we're still human and we're human beings and we're required to do good. We're put on this planet to do good. So I know
Definitely.
this is too, mushy feeling for people, but I do think there's a place and time for everything. And if we continue to operate individually and don't operate collectively and support one another, we're not going to solve this issue around inclusion.
Definitely. And very, very quickly, Tyronne, talk about a little bit about your book and, the name of it, what is it about, and where can people find it?
Thank you again for the opportunity. So my book is called Diversity Done Right. It will be available in April the 30th. We're taking pre-orders right now, and I didn't learn this. I'm a new author of a book, but pre-orders dictate the success of the book. So as many pre-orders as you have, it actually keeps you in that number one book. I was this month I've been the number one bestseller, the number one new release, the number one HR book, the number one diversity book, and number
Wow.
three social psychology. So again, but every books come out literally every day. And so staying in that place is based upon how it shows up on social media, how it sells, how many pre-orders that it sells, and then the endorsements that you actually get. So there's a methodology that organizations use to be able to classify bestsellers. So I encourage everyone, if you want to know more about diversity, you want to know what tools and techniques are available to you, if you like storytelling, you want to be able to see how you rise as you climb, buy the book. You can go out on Amazon.com. I think there's a discount out there right now. Get the book, read the book, endorse the book. Would love to offer some opportunities to have conversations with people about the book. I think the more we are aware and the more we tell our stories, the more likely we are to close the gap.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Tyronne. This is great. Thank you for everything you're doing for the community. Thank you for everything you've done already. I'm sure that you are one of the many people right around the world that have been helping grow the awareness right of diversity, inclusion, and everything in between. So we really thank you and appreciate you for that, and thank you for taking the time to be on the show today.
Absolutely. And I encourage you, Leo, keep doing what you're doing. Keep hope alive. Do good.
Definitely.
And do well. Do good
Definitely.
and be well.
Definitely, Tyronne. Thank you so much. And
All right.
everyone, this was Tyronne Stoudemire, and this is Angel Leon, the host of Minority Mavericks. And this is the show where we tell the story of all minority entrepreneurs, founders and investors of this world. See you next time.
Next time, take care, my friend.